don't know.
You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the capitalist corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the capitalist corner.
That's right.
Oh, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's
you
right,
told me to
folks.
take the lead, and now you're jumping in.
I'm going to let you take the lead. I'm just going to do the opening for you. Welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I'm Mark Pellegrino, your host and also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and vice chair of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Liebowitz, who is in a rage right now, folks. You should have heard him before we even started the show. He is going off big time, and so we're changing the topics based on Michael and what he wants to talk about. It's very interesting. I'm sure you're going to like what he well, I don't know if you're going to like what he has to say, but you're certainly going to be interested and stimulated by what he has to say. It'll make you challenge your premises for sure. Please remember to like and subscribe to this channel while you're doing that, please. And remember, we take super stickers and super chats as well. Michael, I think the subject is going to be the Iran war and also some parallels to the Iraq war. Yeah?
Yes. First, I want to give a hypothetical. And I want everybody to imagine that this is the case today. Okay? I want you to think that there's a brutal dictator in the Middle East who has used chemical weapons in the past, who tried to have an American president assassinated, who is a supporter of terrorism, a state sponsor of terrorism, who actually pays the families of Palestinian suicide bombers, who has used chemical weapons, who is actively pursuing a nuclear program, although he doesn't have one yet. But, you know, how long should we really wait until he gets one, given that we know he's an enemy of the United States of America? Furthermore, Benjamin Netanyahu says that the guy is close to getting a nuclear weapon, and also says that if you take him out, I guarantee it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. If you know all of this, and by the way, this guy is also refusing to let anybody inspect his nuclear program. He's throwing them out. If that's all true, could we support war against this country? The reason that I ask this is because every single one of these things is true, was true of Saddam Hussein. I'm not talking about the lies that were told. I'm not talking about the bullshit that came afterwards. Nothing. What I'm talking about are facts. Everything that I stated there is true of Saddam Hussein. He was a brutal dictator. He was so bad, in fact, that the Israelis thought it necessary to take out his nuclear reactor. Right? So he's a brutal dictator. He's invaded his neighbors, Saddam, in the past, both Iran and Kuwait. He's used chemical weapons. He's suppressed his own people. He's gassed the Kurds. He's had U.S. people attacked. He's a state supporter of terrorism who's actively pursuing nuclear weapons. Now, everybody today says, well, it was a mistake to go after him. Has Netanyahu, by the way, ever apologized for any of this? For telling the American people that this guy was close to a nuclear weapon, that he's an active sponsor of terrorism, and that we needed to take him out, and if we did, it would spread democracy, and it would weaken Iran, by the way, is what he claimed. It was going to weaken Iran to do this.
I think, Michael, just to interrupt for a second here,
Sure.
Aside from the fact that Israel took out their nuclear reactor and sort of finished that argument for everybody, don't you think Netanyahu is probably coming from the assumption that the United States would replace the regime with a democratic, mostly liberal, secular regime, but that wasn't on Bush's agenda?
Well, I don't know what Netanyahu's point was. What I do know is that war often doesn't go the way it's intended to go. My only point in all this is to say, to be dicks to people like us who are skeptical of this war, especially given that it's unconstitutional, which, by the way, in the Iraq war, they actually got congressional approval for it, as opposed to this, right? But to criticize those of us who are skeptical and, basically say we're detached from reality, given the skepticism, is absurd. Now, let me tell you what got me thinking about all of this morning. I saw a post on Facebook about how the mainstream the problem with Saddam, who's saying was that I don't know what I don't understand, Robert.
It was afterwards. He's jumping on what I said, which was that we did not require the country to establish a rights-respecting democratic republic because Bush thought, like he sort of pushed onto Netanyahu with Hamas, voting in and of itself, the democratic institution of voting, is what he was going after, not the MacArthur-esque. We're going to come in here, occupy, force constitutional norms down your throat,
right.
Force Western norms down your throat. Right. That didn't happen.
Okay. So then is the argument then if we did that, it's justified? Because there's no sign, by the way, zero, that's going to happen in Iran right now. None. The idea that this is somehow a fight for freedom or to liberate the Iranian people is bullshit. That's not happening. Nobody's even fucking claiming it anymore. Right? So if that was the point, that's gone. So let's just dismiss that Pollyanna bullshit from our thinking because it's not going to occur. Nobody is even claiming it anymore. Right? So whatever argument there was, gone for that. Okay. But let me just tell you what got me thinking about this now. So this morning, I saw a post on Facebook. Christopher Smith said it might. Okay, Christopher Smith, provide evidence, right? Because assertions mean nothing to me. I want evidence. If you can provide what evidence there is that we are going to liberate Iran and turn it into a democratic republic, I want to see it. Show me what evidence there is. Because only 15 to 20% of the population, according to polls, even support Pahlavi. Right? The country isn't even unified in favor of a significant thing. And we are not going in there to establish this. So instead of just putting up it might, provide evidence. Because I will. Right? When I don't just come on here and say things for the sake of saying them. You better bet your ass if I'm on here saying something, I have receipts and a lot of them. A lot of them. And now can I just tell you what happened? So somebody said this morning on Facebook that the news in Iran is actually much better than what the mainstream media is reporting. I don't know. Maybe it is.
By the way, that was Yaron Brook's whole show yesterday or the day before yesterday.
Okay. I didn't watch him. Okay. You check the news and Trump watches the shows. Okay. So but Christopher Smith, that's not evidence. You saying you check the news is not evidence of your claim that it might turn into a democratic republic. Okay. So the guy claimed that just what I just said, that, the good news is there. I don't know. Maybe it is. I have no way to know which is true, which is not. I do have an abundance of ridiculous comments and statements from the administration that lead me to be skeptical, on top of the fact that it's unconstitutional that lead me to be skeptical, right? But aside from that, this claim sounded awfully familiar to me because it's the same claim that I made 23 years ago when we were at war with Iraq. So what led me to my claim? Well, one, I knew the mainstream media was biased. I still think they're biased. I knew that they weren't exactly, 100% reliable. I still think that. But given their bias, I assumed they're misreporting. There's a vacuum to be filled. Conservative media, which I bought. So let me just share some of the media. So what I did was I Googled articles and reports from the media diet that I had at the time, which included the Weekly Standard, Bill Kristol's magazine, the National Review, William F. Buckley's magazine, Rush Limbaugh, and Fox News. That's predominantly what I watched. I still watched mainstream media. I just largely dismissed them. So, July 2003, William Kristol wrote an article, July 2003, Turning the Corner. Turning the corner. The good news is we may be turning the corner in the debate on post-war Iraq. Really? Criticism of good news versus bad news coverage from the Weekly Standard. They dismissed post-war skepticism. There's an article written by William Crystal, The War Over Iraq. They argued the removal of Saddam Hussein is a triumph. They critiqued neo-isolationism, meaning people who oppose the war. Right War for the Right Reasons by William Crystal and Robert Kagan. The Collapse of the Dream Palaces by David Brooks. Focus on Political Progress, where they argued that the signing of the Iraqi interim constitution was not being properly acknowledged by critics. The Reality of the Mission. Dismissing skepticism. This is the things that they were writing. National Review, Doom, Doom, and More Doom. A critique of the mainstream media written by Victor David Hanson. Go Google what Victor David Hanson is saying right now about Iran. Google him. Just find out what he's saying, because I've seen it. And you know what? It's the same thing he said back then, but nobody steps up. Nobody steps up. Christopher Smith, I'm going to get to you in a minute. I want you to tell me all they've accomplished. You could do it. Provide evidence, Christopher. That's all I'm asking. Okay, unbelievable. Jonah Goldberg criticized the New York Times. Iraq Unplugged. Michael Rubin argued that news organizations are using simplified polls to suggest Iraqis wanted the U.S. to withdraw. A Moral War, written by, again, Victor Davis Hanson. Something else written by Victor David Hanson, Misplaced Metaphors, The Case for War, Jonah Goldberg. Dismissing Strategic Skeptics, more of the same tired arguments, written by Jonah Goldberg. Rush Limbaugh, he framed the media's focus on casualties and setbacks as a deliberate attempt to demoralize the American public. He compared news coverage to planes landing, how nobody ever talks about the safe landing planes. They only focus on the crashes. And he accused the mainstream media of sabotage. Okay, Fox News. Let's go to Fox News now. They had a war on pessimism. They criticized the corrupt pre-war coverage. They minimized the violence in Iraq. They opinion-driven defenses of the war. Bill O'Reilly told viewers that loyal Americans should shut up once the fighting started. Sean Hannity argued that he wanted to highlight the good news that was coming. They framed it as liberation. And the impact on audience perception was such that a 2003 study found that Fox News viewers were the most likely to believe that weapons of mass destruction had been found in Iraq. So, again, forgive me if I'm skeptical of all the news coming out about how it's really going well and that the mainstream media is deceiving us. So Christopher Smith says what has been accomplished. Okay, they bombed the island over there. We know that. They've killed some high-ranking people. I don't remember their names because they're unfamiliar to me. They're Farsi names, Arabic names. I don't know what they are. So, but they've killed some of them. The claim is that they've reached agreement with 6 countries that are going to be helping with the Straits of Hormuz, which we can get to in a minute. All I want to do by bringing all this is not even to argue there's no good news. That's not what I'm saying. That's not my claim at all. What I'm saying is I'm skeptical. We have a president who lies as easy as he breathes, right? He's given conflicting statements about this war many, many times. The head of intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, in a testimony, would not answer the questions. The previous intelligence report said there was no immediate threat from Iran. So I'm skeptical. That's all. But don't tell me that I'm divorced from reality because I'm skeptical. Don't tell me that this is the most moral war in history and I'm somehow ignoring the evidence, because I'm not. And anybody out there who says I am, bring your receipts. I promise you I will. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so I think your skepticism is an acknowledgement of reality. There's a number of things you're acknowledging, Michael, that are not being taken into consideration by the other side, who want to be the cheerleaders, understandably, of this conflict, because it is one of the most significant geopolitical issues of our day, for sure. Iran has been the biggest state sponsor of terror around the world. They are an evil state actor, for sure. They've got their tentacles all over the Middle East. They've got sleeper cells all over Europe and in America. They are a despicable, despicable regime that needs to be taken down. But your skepticism comes from acknowledging something about our president, that he is a primacy of consciousness guy, that he doesn't really care for facts. He cares only about and makes decisions from his feelings. He has told us, as you've said, Michael, multiple conflicting things with respect to the way the war is going. He told us that we've bombed pretty much everything. Of course, now the Straits of Hormuz are basically closed. There's zero traffic going through there. So apparently, the IRGC is still able to carry out operations along the shores of the Straits of Hormuz to prevent shipping from going through. We are presently bombing them into oblivion. We've taken out 90% of their capacity to wage war in that respect, and that is good news. But what is the president's policy? What is his long-term goal? He's shifted that, Michael. He's shifted it from regime change in the beginning to to potentially dealing with the regime as it is, to just stop them from procuring a nuclear weapon, to downgrading their ability to make war on everybody. He said 100,000 different things. It doesn't make me think he understands that there should be a concerted policy on the part of the military with concerted, specific endgame in mind. I don't think he has an endgame in mind. And with that, it makes it really hard to get behind it, Michael. It makes it hard to say, this is going to end exactly the way we want it to, because there's no endgame. None. So you're acknowledging a point of reality, Michael. The skepticism comes from seeing what is. Now, just because other people are more affected by the high of finally unseating this terrible regime that has done so much evil around the world, doesn't mean we have to fall into their emotional insanity, and we're not.
Okay, I want to read. This is from a Facebook comment on my post explaining my skepticism as this war. Christopher Smith, that's not the end game, at least not according to what anybody is saying.
Yeah, Christopher, I want to say I think that might be the end game of Israel, and that they are certainly pushing towards that, and they are fighting like that, trying to give the Iranian people the opportunity to rise up. They're now trying to disarm and destroy the Basij. And they're doing that with drones, with remote controlled drones, and to taking out checkpoints and killing a lot of those fucking bastards. But that's not America's end game. America doesn't have one right now. Trump doesn't have one right now.
Right.
And,
so yeah. So the guy says, he wrote a lengthy response that I don't want to get into, because in large part it ignores what I said and argues against something I didn't say. But at the end, he says, in order to become another Iraq, this campaign would have to already done way less damage to them than it has. Okay, first of all, they got rid of Saddam Hussein. They took out the regime in Iraq. They haven't done that here. Right? So to say they might, I don't know the comparisons as far as the actual damage that was done. What I do know is that the Iraqi military, a lot of them were surrendering. I don't see that happening here. And they took out the regime and got installed democracy, which we don't see happening here. So
what I remember, Michael, you know what I remember from that time? You can correct me if I'm wrong, though. I do remember the media getting so hysterical. Like, I literally felt like Armageddon was about to happen, that Saddam was going to unleash chemical weapons on our front lines. When parts of the army were actually advancing miles ahead of other parts, that the media was in a frenzy about, oh my God, now they can be surrounded by Saddam's soldiers. And they ended up toppling the regime in like 2.5 weeks, literally toppling them in 2.5 weeks. Something the media not only did not predict, but they went in the opposite direction, that it was going to be this horrific bloodbath.
Yes. And now the Iraqi military was quick to give up. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that there was a civil war in the country, and there were components very hostile to the United States being there. So while the Iraqi military were not the religious fanatics, once they were gone, the religious fanatics, Muqtada al-Sadr, the Mahdi militia, stepped in. And then, of course, al-Qaeda in Iraq and ultimately morphed into ISIS. I think al-Qaeda in Iraq morphed into ISIS. I might be misremembering. But nevertheless, they stepped in and, did damage. Now, and yes, and Iran funded the resistance, Ian. So now there's no boots on the ground, so it's not comparable to Iraq yet. But he says that the IRGC are nuts. Well, they're not showing signs of surrendering that I've seen. I've seen nothing that indicates that there's a rebellion within the country, that the military is getting ready to defect. Nothing. None of that appears to be happening.
Yeah, and I even think, Michael, if they want to put maximum pressure on the regime, they're going to have to put boots on the ground in Karj. I think that's eventually what they're going to have to do, and there's no getting around it.
I don't see how you can accomplish anything productive that's really going to do anything without boots on the ground. Historically, it doesn't happen. But I mean, I'm not going to say it can't. I'm no military expert. I don't understand Iran. The layout of Iran, none of that stuff. The geography. So I don't know.
Yeah, we do. Michael, there is this premise in Western, I guess, ethics that evil is an equal and opposite power to good, and so we do have a tendency, like Reagan did, to treat our enemies as if they are these powerful entities, all powerful entities that we have to try to out strength. I think I remember this statistic. I could be in error, though, that at its height, the Soviet Union had about 19% of our gross domestic product. They were so much poorer than us. They were so much less efficient than us. If there came time that there was going to be a battle between us and the Soviet Union, we would have destroyed them. Had we had the follow through that the people had in the 30s and 40s, it would have been almost no battle. Yeah. And we're doing the same thing with China right now. We pretend that they are this massive giant. We ignore all the actual economic evidence over there and all the evidence that they're crumbling internally over there, and we still project that they have a great deal of strength. But the only thing I can conclude from this, Michael, is that the political class likes to keep us in fear. I mean, they kept us in fear about Iran, and what is Iran? It's proven itself to be a paper tiger. They're really not. They're really sort of inept.
Yeah, I do not think that they were a military threat to the United States. But, I mean, look, you get an ICBM and attach a warhead to it. You don't need to be militarily strong if you just send that fucking thing out. You know what I mean? So I don't want to just be dismissive of the idea that they were a threat. But, there is counter evidence, and all of it needs to be taken into consideration. I mean, I still go back to the war's unconstitutional, so I oppose it, right? But there's other steps in the equation also that need to be considered. If they go to Congress, then what are we going to think? What are we going to do? And the claims of the Trump administration and the cheerleaders, I shouldn't use the word cheerleaders. I'm sorry. I don't want to be dismissive. The people that support the war, I just haven't found it convincing at all in terms of what are the objectives of the war. What is a reasonable plan, and that we had to do this right now.
Yeah, certainly we had to do this right now is not becoming the best argument on the planet. But a regime change, I think, is what, as Israel has been shooting for, it was what we were shooting for initially, and now we're not. Ian Gilmore says, I think Yaron is being reasonably objective about this. He's not buying the negative spin from the media or the positive spin from Trump administration. He acknowledges the mess of Hormuz, et cetera. He also says that, that he has somebody within the administration who listened to some of his advice with respect to opening the Straits of Hormuz, and that is what is informing their recent attempt to form a coalition to protect the shipping in the Straits of Hormuz.
That's good. We can pivot to that next because that's good.
Okay, but Akira says, I think objectivists are too enthusiastic about the war to claim they're not supporting Trump. Well, I think guys like Yaron, I think, who are the most clear-minded about this in the objectivist community, aside from us, that is, who support the war. I think he never holds out a lot of hope that Trump is necessarily is the guy at a helmet. He just says, let's hope he continues, and he has follow-through. So there's a certain amount of shooting in the dark that Yaron understands as part of this equation. And he thinks if we continue along this trajectory, then we can affect regime change. But he's not at all certain that a guy like Trump is the one to do it. So to me, he's one of the best people out there commenting on the war. Certainly the most objective commentary. You're not going to get it from CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. You're going to get the polar tribal crap out there interpreting it through their lenses. I think Yaron has a pretty clear-headed perspective, though.
Okay, so you mentioned I haven't listened to Yaron a lot on this. I generally, I get my reporting from reading, and if I see something good on social media that I think is relevant, I'll look at it, a clip, I'll investigate it. So I haven't seen Yaron. I did hear him admit early on that it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, he said that early on,
which I liked. He hasn't gotten back to me. Well, he did initially. I offered to debate him on the morality of the war. He said he'd get back to me. He hasn't yet, but he's a wicked busy guy. So, but anyway, so the Straits of Hormuz, Trump has been appealing for help. And I've seen it said that, yes, they've all caved and agreed to help. At least 6 major countries have agreed to help. They are Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the Netherlands. They gave a statement. They said they are ready to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. They said they welcome the commitment of nations who are engaging in preparatory planning. They condemned in the strongest terms recent attacks by Iran on ships. Now, Italy and Germany have subsequently come out and made clear that they are not talking about any immediate military help, but rather a potential multilateral initiative after a ceasefire. So that's 2 countries already. The other countries, at least until, before we've come on, unless they've come out since, haven't given any indication of what this help is, of what it is going to consist. So again, I mean, how are we not skeptical? We have the bloviator-in-chief out there bragging how he's gotten help. 2 of the countries immediately say, no military help, not until after a ceasefire. And no statements have come counter to that from the other 4 countries, nor have they committed or said, what these people should be doing. Or what they're going to do. Mark, have you seen anything on this?
No. It seems like the language is also, with the majority of these powers, provided the United States is attempting to de-escalate the conflict over there. That's what their agreement is contingent upon. And that's vague, Michael, because if you're bombing IRGC, emplacements, armory emplacements, or missiles or drone emplacements along the Straits of Hormuz, aren't you then trying to de-escalate the conflict by taking out their weapons? So I don't know what de-escalate means. For them, it may mean, trying to call for a ceasefire now before the IRGC is unseated or before they're completely incapacitated. I'm not sure what it means either, but as usual, Trump is prematurely ejaculating. Sorry, Persephone, I did say it. He's telling us that we have something that we don't have yet necessarily.
Christopher Smith wants to first. Jason Adams says Yaron recommends things to read to his audience. Well, maybe we should start doing that. Persephone seems to agree that we recommend things to read for the audience. All right. I think it's a good idea. Persephone, get to it.
With respect to this conflict, with respect to this, the conflict in the Middle East, the problem in the Middle East, or just in general?
everything. We should recommend stuff. So what I'm going to do every day, I normally send stuff to Persephone. I didn't today. I'm going to send it all to Persephone, and then she can post it all online, and then as recommendations from the show, and so we can get that done. So the question from Christopher Smith: do I think any administration other than this in the near to longer term future would ever address this? I don't know, and I also don't know that what do we mean by address it? Do you mean all out war? Is all out war necessary? Again, I haven't seen a compelling case made to me that we have to do this. I simply have not. I'm not saying it can't. It can't. But a lot of the arguments I've heard in the past about other places that turned out not to be true, aka Iraq. So I'm skeptical. Now, it doesn't mean Iran is good. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything, but maybe there's other things. So I don't know what another administration would do. It depends. Things are fluid. In 2015, I never thought Donald Trump could get elected president. So, and that's just 11 years ago. So who knows? You're asking me for a hunch, Christopher. I generally don't live on hunches, and I don't know. I also don't know what the intelligence briefings are telling the commander-in-chief, the president. So
I don't even think the president knows what the intelligence briefings.
Well, that's true too. I mean, he may not. So I ultimately don't know. They may be telling him things that I have no clue. Yes, and Akira Felix says that's not the question. He says, by that logic, Trump should be given complete control because Iran is bad. How is that not the same thing MAGA asked for? He was a little bit harsher in his language, but I'm a nice guy, so,
Indeed.
Indeed, I'm a nice guy?
No. I was talking about Akira Felix's comment.
Oh.
So
I think our viewership has gone down since we started criticizing the war in Iran.
I have absolutely no doubt of that, Michael. Everybody wants unity in times like this, but we don't go for unity for its own sake. We want to go for the truth, and we think it's best that we do that. As representatives of our political party, we want to be completely transparent and principle oriented, and we want to carry that over to our thoughts with respect to the way the government should be conducting itself in foreign affairs like this.
Of course. My only point here is to make the case that it's not like Mark and I are taking a stand to be more popular. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the case. We're telling the truth as we see it. We're explaining to you the conclusions that we've, yes, subscribership keeps climbing. That's true. And it may just be a backlog. It may catch up. You know what I mean? Where people are listening to past episodes. So, we're telling the truth. We're giving our best analysis, which is reasonable. And by the way, we often don't even agree with each other, and that's okay too. And it's okay for the audience to disagree with us. The only thing I do not like is when, and maybe this is a problem for me. I don't like being accused of being somehow dishonest or of not considering all the evidence or just, evading facts. To say shit like that, it's just, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe petty. Or
it's anti-intellectual. Mike. It's just it's anti-intellectual. To be honest, it's
if you've got an argument, make it, and if it's compelling, I'll change my mind. I've changed it in the past. All right, so Phil, I just want to give credit. Phil here gives us £10. Thank you so much, Phil.
Thanks,
Phil. He said, wouldn't it just be cool to imagine the evil was vanquished and the Stones are opening with Jumpin' Jack Flash in Tehran's first free concert in front of, say, only 2 million? I think there's a bit of a generational problem here, Phil. I'm
on your page, Phil. I'm on your page, baby.
Yeah, we're not going to have Boomerfest 2026, right? I don't think that's what they want.
Hey, Phil, I mean, I imagine the same thing. When I saw the Iranian diaspora turning out in the streets in Toronto, for example, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of people, I thought that there might have been this kind of movement within Iran itself. And of course, some of the images that we saw coming out of there during the economic downfall there, where there were tens of thousands of people in the streets, it seemed like the regime was prepared to fall. And I certainly tweeted out, next year dinner in Tehran with my Persian brothers and sisters, because I certainly want to go there. It's a place that's ripe with historical monuments and amazing places to see, and it's closed to us because it's a terrorist stronghold. And I'd love to go there, and I thought that would be the case. But it turns out that either Michael says there's much less support for this going forward for this conflict than we assumed that there was. And
no, I didn't say that. No. I have no idea what the support is. I'm saying there's no unified. It's not unified.
It's not unified.
So you might have multiple groups. I don't know. I don't know the answer to this.
And they're disarmed.
I just know there's no coalition that's rising up. That I know. I want to get your take on this, Mark. So Greg Doherty
let me just give a shout out to Kaya Prigmore first, because she gave us a $4.99 sticker. Thanks, Kaya. Hope your jiu-jitsu is going well. Go ahead.
Kaya's wonderful. We love Kaya. Greg Doherty we love as well.
Yes, Greg. Thank you.
Phil says, I'll put my money on Keith still being alive long after any of us. You may be correct.
He looks the same today as he did in 1960.
He maybe have found the fountain of youth in his steady diet of heroin and pills. Okay, so Greg Doherty says something I find interesting. Greg Doherty, by the way, is somebody who we follow each other on X. He's very thoughtful. Even when I disagree with him, I think he's a thoughtful person, which gets to my point earlier, that people can all be reasonable and thoughtful and come to different conclusions, right?
Absolutely.
So Greg Doherty says a key difference between Iraq and Iran is that Iraq was a brutal secular dictatorship, which I agree, versus Iran, which is an Islamic dictatorship, which I agree. But he then says the conclusion here, or the end piece, is where I take a slight different take with him. He says radical Islam is the enemy. My problem, one of the problems I have is with the definite article, the. Because there's more enemies. Just because somebody is not a radical Islamist doesn't mean they cannot be an enemy. Saddam Hussein was clearly an enemy of the United States. He was, he did engage in the murder of U.S. personnel. He did try to have a United States president assassinated. He did sponsor terrorism. So just because he was secular didn't mean he wasn't paying off terrorist groups, Islamic groups. He certainly was a problem.
Can I say something though, Michael?
Sure. I want to say Nicole Hingle, $5 super sticker. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thanks, Nicole.
Appreciate that.
The thing about secular regimes, though, Michael, is they do have one foot on the ground. They do want to survive in the world, and since they're a secular regime, their philosophy is essentially a take on how to live, right? Whereas the Islamists are not about this world. They don't really care about it. They do want to impose a certain type of regime in the world.
I agree with that.
But they're suicidal. So my point is that an enemy is far more. I don't want to say daunting, but certainly you have to be aware of what you're going to have to do to take care of a suicidal enemy over one that still has a desire to stay on this plane, this earth plane.
Okay, so there's a few things I want to say to that, Mark. I looked up Ba'ath ideology because I wanted to tell you something about that. But Japan had kamikazes,
but they were also motivated by the Shinto religion. They thought the emperor was their god, and so they were
motivated in large part by nationalism.
Chauvinist national, you're right, but it was also generated by the Shinto religion.
Yeah. So the Ba'athist ideology that Saddam, and by the way, Saddam did support religionists. So if you've got a dictator in power who has funds and is sponsoring terrorists, and again, I agree that radical Islam is an enemy of the United States. I'm not differing on that. I'm just saying that to differentiate them from Saddam, especially, if that's the case, then why did we just get rid of Bashar al-Assad, who was also a Ba'athist running Syria. He was replaced with ex-al-Qaeda. Right? So the inconsistency is a bit,
Again, Michael, I mean, we've had this throughout our entire foreign policy history where we back the religionists over the secular quote unquote Marxist adjacent groups.
So
I've Hadin against the Soviets.
The Soviet Union, yeah. So I previously I've read about the Baathists, but I didn't want to misquote. I didn't want to get it wrong. So I just looked it up. We will in a second, Ian. We will move on to the national debt. I just want to talk. So Baathist ideology is an Arab political ideology that emerged in the mid-20th century. It means renaissance or resurrection. It combines three main ideas. Arab nationalism, which nationalism is a strong motivating force. It seeks to unite all Arab countries into a single nation. And emphasizes shared language, culture, and history. Arab-style socialism advocates state control of key industries, promotes wealth redistribution, social welfare, but differs from Marxism, and it's anti-imperialism. It opposes foreign, especially Western influence in the Arab world, which, of course, we have. Its strong emphasis on sovereignty and independence. It has been implemented in both Syria under Bashar al-Assad and under Saddam Hussein. They became rivals, however, between the two. So I'm just saying that Greg Doherty is right here about the Iraq army, I believe. He says secular evil is no better than religious evil, but tends to be less dangerous. I don't know about that. I mean, Joseph
I don't
Stalin.
know about...
I mean, we could always get loose with language and, say the Nazis and the Soviets were, in fact, they transformed their ideology into religion. But, I mean, really, they were bad. So, yeah, we could pivot to the national debt, Mark.
Well, I just wanted to say, Michael, I still think any secular ideology, even if it's evil, that still has some investment in life is on a scale of things less evil than the religious ideology that has no investment in life. Because one is nihilistic and doesn't care about life. It tethers nothing to, even if like the secular one can be erroneous. The conclusions that they draw are wrong. They're flawed. They lead to terrible things. But the religionists discard that entirely. They don't even have a respect for the mind. They don't have a respect for anything in the earth. And they hold martyrdom as an ideal, death as an ideal.
So Christopher Smith, I think you should now Google this. Successful Iranian-sponsored terrorism on continental United States. And then also Google effective Iranian-sponsored terrorism against U.S. personnel abroad. They've had far more success in places like the Khobar Towers and in sponsoring, Hezbollah in Beirut than they've ever had actually hitting the United States of America, the homeland. I don't know, Mark, about the idea that if you've got nationalists and you've got socialists and communists, and Nazis who believe in, dear leader and really think that they want to live under their circumstances, right? Under their ideology and don't want to accept any other. I think they're just as dangerous. I don't know. I mean, that historically, I mean, I suppose, if we go back into the times when everybody was religious, I mean, they were all fighting, but I just don't see the Soviet Union. Like, I don't see saying, well, they weren't quite as dangerous because they weren't religious.
Well, Michael, what was there was a policy that animated the proliferation of nuclear weapons and our foreign policy with respect to Soviet Union called MAD, mutual assured destruction.
Yeah, Christopher Smith's going to get on my last nerve, and I like him.
No, don't let him.
No, I have to. No, we have to address what the comments are. He's saying that they funded al-Qaeda.
They did, but this first. Mutual assured destruction assumes that the other side doesn't want to die. Right? The concept that if we build up such arms that they understand if they throw first, they're going to die, that sensing our power prevents them from making the first move and initiating violence against us. That's not there with the Islamic fundamentalists because they don't
Yeah.
care about life.
You're saying that if you're saying that the fear of death is a hell of an impediment, sure, but I don't know that the Ayatollahs that run Iran are so quick to want to die.
Well, they're not. Otherwise, Khomeini would not have been in an underground bunker,
right?
With his.
So he says, Christopher Smith says Iran has funded al-Qaeda. Okay, why don't you get specific? Look at what they actually funded. What they funded was some Hezbollah training of some al-Qaeda, and they allowed al-Qaeda to go through, right? Why don't you see if Iran had any foreknowledge or any involvement at all in the bombing of the trade towers? Then look if they're actually allies with al-Qaeda. Then look at what Iran's response was after 9/11. The public statements of the administration. I mean, when you say they've sponsored al-Qaeda, it's such what's the word I'm looking for? An overstatement of the reality of the situation. They're actually enemies with al-Qaeda. They're actually enemies with ISIS. They have had some transactional support in the past, but not enough to where you're saying that they... All right, get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. They're not the fountainhead. If you're just being a smartass, I'm not up for it. And if your question is serious, it's fucking ridiculous. Google your question, Christopher Smith. Whether Iran is the fountainhead of Islamic fundamentalism. If you're being a smartass, dude, I'm not. I don't want it. I don't like it. We're having a serious discussion. If you're serious, your conduct, your statement shouldn't be taken serious.
So, Michael, someone wanted us
Let's
to
move on to the debt. I think we should.
But the reason someone wanted us to move on, I don't know if they were being sarcastic or not. So tell me if you were.
Ian Gilmore was serious. Yeah, move on.
He was serious to show how the Iran war would actually make the debt worse. I'm not so sure that would impact the debt as much as a couple of social programs out there that need to be taken care of. Michael, what do you think?
I think they all impact the debt. They're already adding to the debt to support the war. That's already occurring. But the debt is a very big problem. And they just had this thing where Congress is admitting it's a problem. Not only that, but the interest on the debt is much bigger. I don't know about much, but it's actually larger than military spending.
Yeah.
There's no way we're growing our way out of it.
Right.
Because the higher the more the economy grows, the higher the interest rates go. The only way to really do this is to do what you said, and that's to cut spending on things like, Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare, etc.
Yeah, and now that we have a spoils system democracy and have had one since the 1930s, Michael, political power and the careers of these politicians are made by building up constituencies that are dependent upon them distributing subsidies to their neighbor, to their voters. And so there's no political will on the part of any of these folks to take care of this debt. They understand we're heading for a fucking cliff. And the predictions for when Social Security is going to go insolvent, Medicare is going to go bust, keep shrinking. They keep getting closer and closer to today. It was like 2035, then it was 2030. Now it's like 2028. It's like right around the corner unless they start cutting precipitously. Check this out, Michael. I went to have a meeting with my financial folks. We were talking about
awesome.
We were talking about my portfolio and all that. And at one point, one of my financial guys turns to the other guy and goes, "Well, we didn't discuss Social Security. Why didn't we talk about the Social Security benefits that it'll be receiving?" And I turned to him, and my other financial guy said, "Well, because I'm not going to get them. I mean, we already know by the time I retire, which I'm not doing, but by the time I reach retirement age, which is sort of just around the corner, unfortunately, I'm going to be means tested out, or according to my financial guy, I might receive a check from Social Security for, a fraction of the amount that I actually paid into the system, but it'll be taxed at 100%. So in other words, I'll receive nothing. So I'm not nothing. I get nothing, even though I've been paying into the system, Michael, since I was 15 and a half years old. That was the time that I actually held a legitimate job.
Back in the 20s.
Before the crash. So look, I mean, these are insolvent.
They didn't have Social Security then, but nevertheless,
Medicare and Social Security are insolvent. The only thing that the government can do to start lowering the debt is cutting spending, and they have to do it fairly precipitously. Michael, I would say 5 years ago it would be 15%. Now I think they have to cut by 25%. And we have massive numbers of people who are now dependent on these subsidies for their livelihood, for to live. I have an 81-year-old friend who's dependent on SSI right now. He has, he's in that state because he didn't save. He wasn't wise. He didn't think about old age. He didn't do any of the stuff that a responsible human being has to do. And now he's dependent on the state. So it's like there's no political will to stop it. The article did offer a sort of interesting solution. Did you remember the solution? You want to talk about it? Because I thought it was interesting.
What they had, they wanted to put together this organization that I quite frankly forgot what the hell the recommendation was.
Oh, so they had a base closure like committee that got together.
Committee,
yeah. And so they want to do the same thing with these programs. They put up an independent panel that makes these cut recommendations. It's separate from the legislature so that none of the Congress, the pussies in Washington, have to take responsibility for actually cutting the budget. They just do what the third-party independent panel suggests, and then they're off the hook with their constituency, Michael, for not bringing home the bacon.
Yes. Do you know this quote? I do. I'm curious if you know what it's from.
Wait. I don't know what that is.
Oh, my Lord. I'm sad. The world is a sad, plaid place today.
I don't know.
My offer is this, Senator: nothing, including the fee for the license. That senator ended up with a dead hooker in his bed.
Okay, go ahead. Keep telling me because I'm drawing.
Godfather 2.
Oh, okay.
Godfather 2. Gee willikers, Mark. You're supposed to be an actor.
Wait, I was looking to real life. I've seen that movie 50 times. I didn't remember that quote.
Well, that's a sad state of affairs, Brohim.
Hey, wait a minute. Killer. What does that say? Killer thieves and lawyers. I do know Godfather 2. I just don't.
No, you don't. You just got it wrong. So no,
I've seen it 50 times. I know Godfather 2. I just didn't remember that quote. Because, Michael, I thought you were asking me for a real life thing. I thought this was something that happened on the floor of the Senate. That's what I didn't know.
Well, it wasn't. We have a question from Jason Adams, so we can move on from Mark's complete ignorance of cinematic history. And he's an actor trained by the great Rod Steiger.
I wasn't trained by Rod Steiger.
You did something with him. What were you doing then? Just getting his coffee? What was going on?
Well, sort of. Yeah. After he played my dad in a short film that I helped.
I thought he trained you. I thought he was a mentor to you of sorts.
He was. I traveled all over the world with him.
Well, what does mentor mean if he's not training you?
He's not training me acting. We talked a lot about,
What did he mentor you on?
We talked a lot about acting. We talked a lot about acting, but I didn't do acting exercises with him. We just talked about acting and writing and story and all that shit.
So Jason Adams wants to know.
Thank you, Christopher Schmidt. Meisner. It's Meisner. Meisner's my real mentor.
But you told me Steiger was your mentor.
I said Steiger was a mentor because my mentor said form a relationship with him. So I did.
So he was a mentor. If he's a mentor, he's a mentor.
A mentor, but he didn't.
That's all I said. I didn't say. So what did he mentor you about?
The history of film, some of the histories that he did, interactions with great
actors.
Did he help?
Did he help?
Poitier.
Okay. Did he help with your craft?
Sort of.
All right, I win. All right,
because he gave me some insight.
He gave you insight. He helped. You told me he was a mentor. So look, with Iraq, Jason Adams says in 2002, was it not enough to say that they were not compliant with weapon inspectors in the terms of the first Gulf War to take Saddam out and occupy them? This is why, Jason Adams, you're right. First of all, there's a big difference between being justified in doing something and saying we should do something. Yes, Saddam deserved to be taken out. The question is, was it the right move for the United States of America to do it? And it's similar to me just now, what's going on. Yes, the Iranian regime deserves to be taken out. That's a different question from, is it in the interest of the United States to do it? Both are necessary. Right, Mark?
I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely. But if you're, look, Michael, if it's justified to take them out, and if you're going to commit to taking them out, then you have to have a plan. You have to have an end game, and you have to unapologetically do that plan and get that goal, as opposed to bowing and scraping to world opinion and pretending like you're not trying to get regime change somewhere, or that you respect all cultures and types of government equally. That's partly what gets America in the trouble that they're in. I mean, you look at Bush imposing democracy for democracy's sake in Gaza and in Iraq, and what happens? We get Hamas, and we get crazy ISIS adjacent terrorists in Iraq, and Shia militias over there in Iraq fighting each other in a civil war. That's what you get when you pretend democracy for its own sake is actually good.
Should I give advice to somebody in the audience, or should I just move on to the next relearning old lessons?
Well, it depends. Go ahead. What is
okay?
The thing that
So I'm gonna. So Ian Gilmore is in a discussion with Christopher Smith. Ian Gilmore, by the way, I find to be very, very good with his information. I've disagreed with him at times, but he's very good. So they're having this discussion where Christopher Smith said that Iran is the fountainhead of Islamic fundamentalism, and Ian Gilmore is explaining, no, actually the Muslim Brotherhood and Saudi Arabia has sponsored Wahhabism. So then Ian Gilmore said, what does he say? I want to go through it. Ian, who's the greatest financial sponsor of Islamic fundamentalism? So Ian Gilmore responds with, Iran is reportedly the biggest sponsor of Islamic terrorism. I don't know if they are also the largest sponsor of Islamic fundamentalism. Ian Gilmore then says, Saudi Arabia is the largest exporter of Wahhabism, true, which is the most common form of Islamic fundamentalism, true, also the one that has killed far more Americans than anybody else, in terms of building madrasas, etc. Christopher Smith says, I asked about largest financial sponsor. Of what? You said Islamic fundamentalism, but the data is about Islamic terrorism. So what I'm going to say is this. Christopher Smith, you're on the verge of, I'm telling you this because I've liked you, of looking like you're not being intellectually honest. Because if you're claiming that they're the biggest, that they were the fountainhead of Islamic extremism, that's not the same as saying that they're the biggest state sponsor of terrorism. Just like saying, when you make the claim and you say they're the biggest state sponsor of terrorism, yes, but you can't just stop the analysis there. You need to move forward and say, okay, how much terrorism have they sponsored against the United States? How much has that terrorism been actually in the United States? When you make the claim, like you have in the past, because 1 minute's not disconnected from the other, that they were involved in 9/11, and then you find a Google thing that says they have funded al-Qaeda. Those are not the same things.
Yeah, if you're go ahead.
Okay, you don't need my cognitive advice. Okay,
no, but
you don't.
But
you're splendid.
Wait, Christopher, if you're talking about the fountainhood of Islamic terror, then to me that's the intellectual and philosophical roots. It's the Muslim Brotherhood that certainly has exported the ideology that inspired Iran.
I mean, he doesn't need my advice. He said he comes here for the news. I was giving him some. The news is, Christopher, that you're on the verge of not being taken intellectually seriously. Because you're equivocating on what you're saying.
Not to go too far off topic. We only have 2 minutes left, but I want to give a shout out to somebody who passed away. So I want to give a shout out to his family, but just to his reputation. To any martial artist out there, Chuck Norris passed away recently. I think he was 86 years old. The guy was the real deal. I mean, a lot of people don't know how great Chuck Norris really was. I mean, he sort of inspired me as a young as a young man to pick up Taekwondo and Thai boxing and the stuff that I did early on in life. He is almost single-handedly responsible for bringing the Machados and the Gracies here and starting them off and rooting Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu also in the United States. He was way ahead of his time. He was the real deal, unlike a guy like Steven Seagal, who would get his ass kicked in about a half a second by anybody who knows what they're doing. Chuck Norris was a real fighter. He really put himself on the line. He was quite a heroic guy. And Michael, I mean, I was watching his advertisements just literally up until 2 days ago for all his health products. And he looks so vigorous for a guy his age. And he's out there punching the bag and doing his stuff. And the last thing I expected to see was him passing away so suddenly. So a shout out to Chuck Norris. You were a great dude, man. And you were an inspiration.
And 50 checks from Jason Adams, who says Chuck Norris didn't cheat death. He won fair and square. And there are a lot of very supportive comments about, a lot of supportive comments of Chuck Norris. So
those are all great, though. I love those Chuck Norris comments. Those have been going on for a long time, by the way. They're awesome Chuck Norris comments. All right, go ahead.
You think he could have beat Bruce Lee in a real fight?
Yeah. No fucking question.
Wow.
No
All right. Well, Mark can be wrong. Okay. Anyway, no, Mark's probably right. I don't know anything about this. It's Krona, not checks. You told me last time it was checks, Persephone. Okay.
No, it's Krona.
Okay, so Kronas. Thank you for the Kronas. Capitalist thought of the day. I'm going to incorporate the one subject we didn't actually get to into my capitalist thought of the day. The capitalist thought of the day is relearning old lessons. There was a great article today in the Daily Economy about this. It was about a debate between Frederick Bastiat and Joseph Proudhon. And what it is that they were talking about capping interest rates. And Bastiat made the point that if you cap interest rates, you're going to distort the economy. People aren't going to be putting out their capital to work. You're going to suppress growth. But now, we've had Trump come out in favor of caps on interest rates. And, also Bernie Sanders and AOC, I think, as well. And it's just that we must keep learning and keep teaching the same economic lessons again and again and again. But we will do so because that's what we're here for. All right, Mark, you've got a question mark.
I do. Oh, shoot. I'm totally unprepared for the question mark. Oh, okay. I'll just ask
a question mark. It's not a question mark. You got to ask a question. Hold on. I didn't go. I was supposed to go back to YouTube and answer the questions or address the answers from yesterday. So let me just do that real quickly here. And I'll do that, and then you can do. So you have time to think of your question.
I already know. I'm gonna go off the Chuck Norris theme. Do you want me to? You want me to say it now while you look for it?
There's no answers to yesterday's question, so you go ahead and answer. You go ahead and ask.
So, folks, jumping off the Chuck Norris theme, do you think Chuck Norris could have beaten Bruce Lee in a real fight? Of course, they fought on film, and he gets his ass kicked by Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was certainly pretty in his technique. He's got some interesting philosophy if you read some of his stuff. But could he have beaten Chuck Norris in a real fight? I don't think so. I want to see what you guys have to say. So, Michael, I guess we're going to be here on Monday, right? Same bat time, same bat channel.
I'll be here on Monday. I'm always here, and we will be here at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time for Everyday Ethics.
Everyday Ethics. So we'll be here on Monday for Capitalist Corner at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern time. That gives you the whole weekend, folks, to check your premises. So do yourself a favor and check those premises.
Yes, and I love you, audience, even Christopher Smith, the actualist.
Thank you, man. Peace.